Verse 3. Now, when it says, and they, keep in mind that they is talking about the 144,000 that were mentioned in verse 1. It says, and they sang a new song before the throne and before the four living creatures and the elders. Now, again, we had mentioned in verse 14, verse 14, chapter 14, verse 1, that it says that the Lamb was standing on Mount Zion. Now, if the Lamb is standing on Mount Zion, what is the time frame there?
Post-second coming.
Right. It's after the second coming. But now look in verse 3, John says that these 144,000 sang a new song before the throne and before the four living creatures. Well, where were the four living creatures earlier? And it says, and the elders. You recall there were 24 elders. Where were they?
Before the throne of God.
Yeah, but where was the throne at the time?
Heaven.
Heaven. Now, the fact that these 144,000 are present tells us that either they have been raptured or the throne of God together with the living creatures and the 24 elders have returned to earth along with Christ in the second coming. Now, because the 144,000 are protected and that they are God's missionaries during this period of time, I think the more likely interpretation at this point is that when Christ returns, his throne and his entourage, to include the 24 elders and his angelic attendants, would return with him. Of course, we know that if it's a second coming and the 24 elders are, well, got 12 apostles and 12 tribal elders of the 12 tribes of Israel, the likelihood there is that they've returned with him, correct? So, in all probability, we're talking about God's throne having moved from heaven to now where he's setting up his kingdom on earth. Yes.
I'm a little confused. Isn't the throne with the four creatures that guard it the Father's throne?
It depends on the context. Because keep in mind, the Son's throne and the Father's throne are not like in two different places.
Yeah, he's at the right hand, I understand. But the throne that's described as having the four creatures surrounding it and the 24 elders in front of it is the Father's throne, isn't it?
Right, and that's true earlier. But the problem with that is if the church returns with Christ to include at least 12 of the elders, and the likelihood is that if the other 12 of the elders are the 12 patriarchs of the 12 tribes of Israel, that at this point Israel has also been, resurrected. Because you recall this, there's some question at this point as to the timing of the resurrection of Old Testament saints. Some claim that the Old Testament saints are resurrected with the church. However, some of the passages we studied in Daniel, I believe this was in the 12th chapter, seem to indicate that the Old Testament saints would be raptured, or not raptured, but resurrected at the second coming. At this point, it wouldn't make any difference which, because if the second coming has occurred, then regardless of whether the resurrection of Israel occurs before or after the tribulation, both would have happened by this point. So those 24 elders have at this point been resurrected, and certainly we know that if Christ returns in the second coming, who's coming with him? The church. So the church, including those elders, would be on earth. what this tells us is that those 24 elders and the attendants at the throne of God have returned. Wherever the throne of the Father is, they have, or according to this scene, have returned and are attending the throne of Christ.
What is the last phrase in the
And we get to that in a minute.
who had been purchased from the earth?
We ain't gotten that far yet.
Okay. Sorry.
I'm just trying to establish the fact that at this point, John has made it clear from the description that in the early part of chapter 14, the second coming has occurred. Now, you may think, well, that's, yeah, so what? The problem is that as we continue, the remainder of chapter 14, we see that John goes back and it's before the second coming. So that's why I'm saying that chapter 14 is a bit confusing time-wise. All right, so we've established that. Now let's continue with the rest of chapter 3 and tackle Merrill's question.
I mean, verse 3.
Well, yeah, you know what I meant. Verse 3. Or we could go back and tackle chapter 3.
No, that's not.
Said they were there before the throne, the four living creatures and the elders, and no one could learn the song. Notice it says they sang a new song. No one could learn the song except the 144,000 who had been purchased from the earth. Now,
That phrase, purchased from the earth, makes me think this is happening in heaven and not on earth.
not necessarily. Because, for example, right now, where are you right now?
On earth,
Where,
I think.
have you been purchased?
Yes.
Yes.
From what?
From sin?
Purchased with a price.
Yeah, purchased with a price by Christ. But
But I won't be purchased from the earth until I'm in heaven.
now you're confusing terms. You will not be removed from the earth. But what is the earth? What does the earth represent at this point? The abode of sin.
Yeah, it's the devil's home.
It's a devil. It's until Christ sets up His kingdom, which we see this is being established at this point. The earth is the abode of the devil. So even though you are still right here on earth, you've been purchased from the earth right here, right now. You just haven't been removed from it yet.
And that's why it's a new song.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Does
I
that
can
make
buy
sense?
I can buy that.
Now, but here's the issue. These 144,000 are singing a new song. Now, you'll notice it doesn't say that everybody else doesn't hear it or whatever. It just says that nobody else could learn this song except them. By the way, before we tackle the explanation of that, look back in Revelation chapter 5.
I have a question.
All right?
Have we been taken up to heaven at this point? We the Christians?
Okay, when we're in this part here in chapter 14, this is just after the second coming. We've been in heaven and now coming back.
Okay, all right. So we're the ones coming back with Christ?
Yes.
then? Okay.
Alright. Look in Revelation chapter 5, verse 9. Actually, even before I tackle verse 9, back up to verse 7. Or, verse 8.
5, 7.
Chapter 5, beginning in verse 8.
Okay.
And when he had taken the book, the four living creatures and the 24 elders, here's that reference to them, fell down before the Lamb, each one, or having each one a harp and golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. And they sang a new song, saying, and of course we could go and read the whole thing, but notice that the elders of the church and the elders of the nation of Israel were given a new song. Here, these 144,000 have a new song. Why the difference? What do you think the song's about? Yeah, maybe. But in chapter 5, verse 9, they weren't on the earth. That one, in that context, that's clearly just after the rapture. First off, why does anybody sing a song to glorify Christ?
Praise.
Praising God.
Say, because we should.
So the one in 5 was a praise of the Father, and the one here is a praise of Jesus?
Could be, but it doesn't really say that. I think the variable here is not who is the recipient of it so much as it is who's singing it. Because ultimately both have the same message, is that we've been saved, by faith in Christ. But earlier on, the new song that the 24 elders are singing, and as they are around the throne, first off, who are the 24 elders representing?
The
12 apostles and the 12 elders of the tribes.
Well, that's who they are. Who are they representing?
Jews.
Jews
And the church.
and the church. So if they're singing a new song as our representatives, what would we be singing a new song about after we have been raptured and find ourselves standing at the throne of God?
Unity of the church, uniting of the
That, the fact that we have been redeemed,
The
we've
glory.
been,
The glory in heaven.
the glory in heaven. But the point is, we've been redeemed. Now, in chapter 14, you've got 144,000 who've been redeemed, but in a different context. This 144,000, are they part of the church?
No.
No, they are not. Are they Old Testament saints? No, they're not that either. They are Jews, however. Now, here's the difference. The Old Testament saints and the church, at the point of the resurrection, notice I didn't say rapture, because as I said, there's still some disagreement over the timing of the rapture of the Old Testament saints. And I think based on Daniel chapter 12, there is strong evidence to indicate that they will be raptured at the end of the tribulation period. But whether they are or not, they are resurrected. And in a resurrection body, what will be our life from that point on? What will be the type of life we will be leading?
Spiritual.
Spiritual life, will we get married and have families?
No.
No, we will not. That's why Jesus said that in answering the Pharisees on their issue of the resurrection, that he said we would be like angels in heaven, which are neither given nor taken in marriage. Now, by the way, when Jesus said that, he did not say, and people take this out of context all the time, never once did Jesus ever said we would be like angels. What he said is that our relationships, that we would be like angels in that we are not given or taken in marriage. Well, why not?
Already done that.
To whom?
earthly
To Christ.
There you go. The church is married to Christ. We are collectively the bride. What about the Old Testament saints? Who are they married to?
God.
We'll be more specific.
Father.
God the Father.
Sorry.
They are the wife of the Father. However, here in this 144,000, they are neither Old Testament saints nor of the church. Also, because they were sealed to be protected from the wrath of the Antichrist and from the pouring out of the judgments, at this point, we have no indication anywhere that the 144,000 were martyred. There will be countless martyrs during the tribulation period. However, nowhere does the Bible say that the 144,000 are going to be martyred. So if they are not martyred, at the time of the second coming, what condition are they going to be in?
still alive.
They're still alive, physically.
And they got the number of Christ on there. Christ getting their
Well, not the number, but they'll have the name of Christ on it. Yeah. All right. Now, here's the issue. The Bible does not say, of course, keeping in mind, you can only draw, a conclusion just so far on what the Bible doesn't say. But the Bible does not say that the 144,000 or any of the other tribulation saints who survive the tribulation are going to somehow be translated at the time of the second coming. For example, what does the Apostle Paul tell us about Christians who are still alive at the time of the rapture?
Will be changed in an instant.
Changed in an instant and resurrected, given a new body. We simply won't experience death at all. We'll just simply be just given right there a brand new body that will be a resurrection body. The Bible does not say that about surviving tribulation saints to include the 144,000. Now, again, I said
So
you
they
can
will
only,
live on into the millennial kingdom?
you always jump ahead of me. That's my next point. Thank you very much.
Sorry.
As I said, you
Sorry,
can't.
not sorry.
Yeah.
Get
You can
called
only,
out- called
as
out
I
for
said,
studying.
you can only draw a conclusion so far as to, excuse me, what the Bible doesn't say. But here's what the Bible does say. First of all, we the church will be returning with Christ and doing what for 1,000 years?
Raining.
Reigning. And Jesus is going to be the king, correct?
Amen.
If you're a king, what does that mean?
You need subjects.
You got to have a kingdom. Absolutely. Well, we're not the subjects. Why, yes, Jesus is our king. I don't think any of us would deny that. But unlike most kingdoms, we're reigning with him. So if we're reigning with him, who are we reigning over? Where's the kingdom?
The people who survived the tribulation.
Now you're getting to the point there. As I said, the Bible it isn't specific on what's going to happen, but we can draw some pretty good conclusions from what the Bible does say are going to happen. If you're going to have a king and you're going to have co-regents, by the way, you know what I mean by the term co-regent? Who doesn't understand that term? Anybody?
Regent is reign.
Okay, a co-regent is somebody that reigns with someone. For example, in England, who's the king?
Charles.
King Charles. Now, if King Charles told his son William that I want you, even though he's a prince right now, if King Charles told Prince William, I want you to begin reigning now with me, he would then become a co-regent. By the way, it's from the Latin word for king.
Co-pilot.
Yeah, a co-pilot, okay. By the way, if God's your co-pilot, who said that?
I said that.
That's what I thought.
Not the co-pilot.
Yeah, if God's your co-pilot, you better switch seats. All right. If we're going to be co-regents with Christ, we got to have somebody to reign over. And let me back up. Before I say that, there is one other point that I was leaving out. Of all the people who deny Christ, all those with the mark of the beast, what's going to happen to them at the second coming?
Lake of fire.
Judgment.
Yeah, they're going to be done away with, executed, eliminated. And all the nations of the earth will be judged. So, if all those who have worshiped the beast are eliminated, which basically is all those who have rejected Christ, well then who's left? By process of elimination, you boil it down to this. Those people you just mentioned, to include the 144,000 who have survived the tribulation period, they're the only ones left. And if those like us in resurrection bodies are not giving and taking in marriage, which means what? We're not going to be doing what?
Having children.
Not going to be having any kids. So who's going to be left to populate the earth?
One's left.
The survivors of the
The
tribulation.
survivors of the tribulation. Now, that brings us full circle back to the song they're singing. They have survived the tribulation period. They have survived the reign of the Antichrist. And now their king, along with the church and all the Old Testament saints, have now returned. And the world is being renewed. What do you think the song is about that they're singing? Praise the Lamb for saving us from the tribulation. So it will be a song of praise for the Lamb, but their perspective on salvation from what they've been saved from will be completely different from ours. We won't experience any of the tribulation horrors. None of them. That doesn't mean the church has had it easy. The church has been persecuted throughout history. But not like the tribulation saints. They will experience the worst, martyrdom and overwhelming, anger of Satan and all the judgments upon the earth
First century.
that have ever occurred. And yet, God has allowed them to survive. Yeah, they're going to have a song of praise.
At this point, the Jews as a nation have also come to Christ.
That's another good
So I was
point.
thinking that this is a song of praise for the salvation of the Jews.
And that's another possibility. Absolutely. That too could be both. Verse 1 and verse 2, for all we know. Again, the Bible doesn't tell us what their song of praise is about, but those are good possibilities. They've been saved from the tribulation. Israel has finally returned to Christ. And of course, the 144,000, I would venture to say they would have a special love and appreciation for their native country now coming to Christ.
So I guess what I was saying, this is the first place that everybody, all the pieces from everything have come together in one place.
Mm-hmm.
Just different perspectives of what they did for the
Right.
And the only ones that could know that song were the 144,000.
And it says no one could learn this. Now, but see, here's the question: what does John really mean when he says that no one could learn it except them? I mean, yeah, you can learn the words of something, but I think what John is getting at here is no one has the appreciation for what they're singing about except them.
The ones that lived through the Holocaust.
Yeah.
They know we don't.
The primary mission of the 144,000 is to preach the gospel to Israel and bring them to Christ, correct? Not so much for the Gentiles. So that is their primary mission, right? To help
Actually, quite the opposite.
Really?
Well, because look at it this way. What was the mission of Israel from the beginning?
To bring the rest of the world to God.
And they failed. They turned their backs on their Messiah. Now, the church has been removed from the world. God has now returned to his covenants with Israel to complete those promises that he has yet to fulfill.
So he's given that job of spreading that gospel back to the Jews.
Now, exactly.
Okay.
Now the nation of Israel has been given one last chance to fulfill what was their destiny to begin with, and it is fulfilled in the person of these 144,000 Jews. Verse 3.
So basically, when the third of Israel takes off to the hills, and there's the 2/3 left, they're pretty much already spoken for. I mean, is there anybody in that has a chance of being saved, or
Unlikely.
yeah? So that's why they've already been.
I mean,
separated.
I'm not going to say, the
Right.
Bible doesn't say that every last one of them are going to be killed,
Right.
but it does say that only a third will survive. So, I mean, whether it's a third plus one or, I don't discount what God can do, but I would say if you're among the 2/3 that get left behind, your fate's not really,
Yeah, they're- I guess
looking
if you-
too good.
Unless you live through the whole thing and he comes back and rescues you from Jerusalem.
But if that were the case, you'd be included in the third that survived.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's just,
But they have, the ones that are left behind, they will have opportunity, right, to accept the Lord.
Well, keep in mind, that's one of the two reasons that the tribulation period even exists.
Okay.
And that first reason is to bring Israel to salvation.
Okay. Okay.
So if you're among the Jews who are left behind, yeah, that's why Jesus is bringing about the tribulation.
Well, I'm thinking about also other people other than Jews.
Well, that was a passage of scripture we looked at about 2 or 3 months ago. I'm going to have to go back and look it up to see which one it was. There is some indication that those who've rejected Christ and missed the rapture, there's a passage of scripture, it's one of that we looked at. It seemed like it was in 1st or 2nd Thessalonians. I'm going to have to go back and look it up to find it. It was one of the Pauline epistles that seemed to indicate that if you missed the rapture, you missed the boat. But it's not a clear passage. I would say some people interpret it that way, but it's ambiguous. It could mean that, but it might not. You know, we can't be sure.
Okay.
All right. Verse 4. All right, you're going to get into another verse here.
I was trying hard to keep it down to one.
All right, verse 4. These are the ones, now this is an interesting verse here. It's describing the 144,000. These are the ones who have not been defiled with women, for they have kept themselves chaste. These are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These have been purchased from among men as firstfruits to God and to the Lamb. And no lie was found in their mouth. They are blameless. So, this is an interesting description of these 144,000. It's telling us that unlike the rest of the world, they have not gotten involved in any of the evil going on in the world. They have been pure spiritually from day one. Now, as far as where it says that they've kept themselves from women, that they've kept themselves chaste, there are some theologians that will say, oh, that's just talking about, that they were chaste spiritually, that they did not get involved with, any of the sins of the world. There are some people that interpret it that way. However, I look at it from the perspective that unless there is a good reason to interpret something in a allegorical or spiritual manner, our best bet is to take it at face value. And what it says is they're chaste, which tells me that 9 times out of 10, they're probably like Paul, and that there are 144,000 men who have remained unmarried. Why would God pick 144,000 men to remain unmarried? I can think of 2 reasons. Anybody?
Concentrate fully on him.
There's number 1, because what did Paul say about marriage?
Better be single whether I'm married or
It
not.
distracted you.
He said marriage was a good thing, said you ought to get married, especially said better to get married than, to get in trouble. But, he said, if you can stay out of trouble, then what Sherry just said, Paul said that if you're going to dedicate your life to serving God, go all the way, which is what Paul did. Paul never got married because he was so focused on his apostleship and on serving God, he didn't have time to get married.
Isn't that the
Okay,
concept
we're
with
gonna have to have a talk.
isn't that the concept with the Catholic Church with the priests though?
Yeah, that's
Well,
where was going.
I would say from the Catholic perspective, that's more of an excuse.
Can I add one thing on Paul? See, I've
No, I'm
heard-
sorry, you can't ask anything.
Relative to Paul, I understood if he was going to be a member of the Pharisees, he had to be married. Though I thought that was one of the requirements.
Mm-mm.
Was not.
No.
Okay.
A lot of them were, but no, there were plenty that
Wasn't
weren't.
it? Yeah. Okay.
But yet Paul said that not being married was a fine thing as far as he was concerned, because it allowed him to focus himself completely on serving God. And look at it, say, from Peter's perspective. Peter was married, but what happened to Peter? He was gone most of the time. What do you look at it from Peter's wife's perspective? She probably didn't get to see her after Peter met Christ and Christ called him into ministry. Peter pretty much, and I should say, Peter's wife gave up a lot. And notice that even though Peter was married, the Bible tells us nothing about Peter having any kids. That doesn't mean he didn't, but we're certainly not told of any. And if he didn't, guess why? He's gone all the time. I heard that. Stan, I don't think heard that. You need to say that. Neither did Larry. Did you hear that?
Oh,
I know nothing.
Did it have something? Did it have something to do with the Navy?
Yes, it did.
What did you say?
I don't remember.
At least the old timers also.
Your brother-in-law said it. He said Paul must have been in the Navy. Gone all the time.
or a truck driver.
Yeah.
That too.
Okay, that's one reason why I can see why they would not have been married, because they were 144,000 missionaries. What was their life? What would their life have been like? Or I should say, what will their life be like in the tribulation period?
Really, really bad.
Oh yeah, they're going to be gone all the time. They're going to be traveling the countryside. And by the way, if you can't buy or sell anything unless you have the mark of the beast, and I think it's a pretty good bet they don't have the mark of the beast, what do you think their mode of travel is probably going to be?
Walking.
Yeah, foot and maybe an occasional hitching of a ride,
Are
or
we living on handouts?
living on handouts. It wouldn't surprise me they weren't married.
Are they gonna all be men?
Yes.
I would hope so.
So there's 144,000 and they're all men.
I would hope so.
What happened to the women that accepted Christ during the tribulation?
They're Christians. But see, here's the reason I say I hope they're all men. Because notice what it says here. These are the ones who have not been defiled with women, for they've kept themselves chaste. I hope that's not a description of any of the ladies.
Well, I'm confused.
Well, I haven't been defiled by women.
I'm glad of that too.
Well,
Confused as in what's,
These aren't the only people who are going to be saved. These are just the 144,000 that God has put His name on their forehead to have the mission of saving bringing everyone else to Him.
spread the gospel.
But there
So
are,
it doesn't mean that all the women aren't going to be saved, if that's what you're thinking.
there are a lot of religious Jews, because it's all about their religion.
Mhm.
There.
Just to dovetail on what Merrill said, don't take that as an affront against women or think that women aren't going to be saved. There's going to be a lot of women saved during the tribulation period. But keep in mind, what is the covenant under which these in the tribulation period are living? Remember, the church is gone by this point. God is fulfilling His old covenant promises to Israel. And under the old covenant, it was all about the men. That doesn't mean women cannot and will not be involved, but the 144,000 are going to be men. Sorry.
Remembering though that the church contains men and women.
Mm-hmm. Now, but here's the second reason that and again, this is my speculation. Don't take this any farther than just that. But here's, I believe, the second possibility of why they would be celibate at this point and unmarried. Go back to who's populating the world during the millennial kingdom.
He's left.
The
Survivors of the
The
tribulation.
survivors of the tribulation. Now you've got 144,000 men who have never been married. Guess what?
All those women.
moving into the millennial kingdom, they're now eligible bachelors.
All the women have been saved.
For all those brand new Christian women. Again,
I can
that's just
see it now. Those women better be quick. Talk about hiding under rocks.
The new episode of Celebrity Bachelor.
Yeah. Yes, yes, we digress.
You're right on edge.
I couldn't help it.
okay, ladies. I'll throw out a good one for you, though. For those of you ladies who have had children, what is the one thing that sticks out in your mind about having a baby? It hurts, doesn't it?
Part of the curse, huh?
Thank you, Eve.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Because what is one of the things that, we haven't gotten that far yet. When we get to the last part of Revelation, it tells us that one of the things that Jesus accomplishes when he renews the earth during the millennial kingdom, say it,
The curse is gone, so that
there's no more curse.
I didn't know that. I thought the curse wouldn't be gone until the earth was destroyed and a new earth was made.
Oh,
So during the period of the millennial kingdom, the earth will no
No
longer
earth.
be cursed?
there's no curse. Remember, the lion will lay down with the lamb. And why does the lion lay down with the lamb? Because there's no more sin. There's no more curse. Well, I shouldn't say there's no more sin. There's going to be some sin. But there's no more curse on the world. Because the King of Kings is now the one ruling. And with that in mind, one of the things that involved the curse from the Garden of Eden, a painful labor. Now, women can have children without hurting.
Well, it's a little late
That
for
must
some of
be
us.
in there.
Was that known in 1,000 years?
And you're thinking, I got born too soon. Okay.
I don't want to do that again anyway.
All right. That brings us up to verse 6 for Sunday. Any questions on this part so far?
Yeah, I just have a question. Why are the 144,000 called the first fruits for God? Because I kind of thought that the redeemed, raptured Christians, I mean, Christ is the first fruit of many brothers. All right, and I'm assuming that when we get raptured, we'll also be first fruits, or is that not the case?
We become the many brothers?
Yeah.
Well, we're talking about multiple harvest here.
Oh, and different type of harvest, right?
Different harvests.
Okay, all right,
These will be the first fruits of the tribulation.
all right, makes sense.
Yeah, keep in mind, you have first fruits every season. And this 144,000 are the first fruits of the tribulation period.
Like the tithe is the first.
Okay, anybody else? All right. Lou, would you leave?